Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here, and in this video we're looking at the general balance changes as well as the ones for US Forces and Wehrmacht that arrived in the 2.0 patch for Company of Heroes 3, Fire and Steel. Relic reverted the pathfinding changes they made in 1.9. That was for forward preference, which did seem to make the pathfinding worse overall. I think most commonly this affected me on this map, Pacino Stalemate. I'll be up here with my Stug G or something like that, shooting a squad of infantry. Then I wanted to rotate off to this point on the side, right click there, instead of pivoting, driving through here safely, it would drive you like up here, around here, and then all the way through here. And it's just like disaster, you know, you'd drive forwards, your opponent's anti-tank guns would just start nuking you, and you'd lose your tank. And I'd say this seemed to negatively affect casemates, things like the Stug, Marder, more than turreted tanks, but yeah, it was disastrous, and I'm glad that they were willing to just straight up revert that change. The fuel cost of the in-game tech structures have been increased for every faction. US Forces and Wehrmacht ones have both gone up by 25, whereas the Brits and DAK have only gone up by 10. Developers say they wanted to, to delay the in-game tanks by a little bit more, not rush the mid-game, which, I can kind of agree with. I think they were arriving a little bit early. But I think the problem with this, especially with cranking up US Forces tech like this, is that now we're just going to push US players back into call-ins. Maybe the new Pershing or the Easy 8 call-ins, stuff like that, just spamming Greyhounds and Chaffies that both got buffed, I think, overall this patch, and then going for the call-ins in the late game. So it's maybe not all a win. Bunkers have received quite a few changes this patch, starting out with their suppression. I've had their nearby modifier increased from 0.75 to 1. Machine guns received this change maybe 1 or 2 patches ago, so bunkers are kind of being brought in line with them. And what this means is that they'll suppress whatever they're shooting at and the units next to them at the same rate, rather than suppressing what they're shooting at faster. We'll see this in action here. Shoot this guy. Everybody hits the deck at the same time, so equal suppression for all. On bunkers will make them better at suppressing blobs. The British HMG Nest has had a cost reduction from 250 down to just 200 manpower now. This gives you a bit more of a reason to build one instead of a Vickers, because now it's cheaper than Vickers, and it won't tie up your population. So I could imagine we'll see quite a few more MG Nests from the Brits after this change. The DAK Bunker has received a load of changes this patch. First off to its model. Now it's shooting out over the fortified area of the bunker instead of over the top of the door. So it's nice to see they're willing to make that visual change and fix that up. Then to its arc, you can see now it's shooting out a much wider cone. Same cone as like a HMG. But in return, they've actually nerfed the amount of suppression it does to like 1 target. Obviously, it did get the AoE suppression buff like all the other bunkers this patch. It's had a cost reduction, same as the Brit cost-wise now, 220 from 220 down to 200. And they've also fixed up a bug on it where I think previously it would get, this is in the Italian Infantry Battlegroup, the prepared positions. They've changed the icon on this. They get the bonus from this twice, I think. Something like that, making it extremely hard to kill. So we're going to test that out here. 720 health, 160 damage AT gun. Should do 106 damage in a hit, I think, with this. So it did 108. Maybe I messed up my calculations, or maybe this isn't perfectly accurate. But yeah, it looks like this is all working now, so you should be able to kill these bunkers a bit more effectively. And for the US Forces Fighting Position, the developers say they wanted players to build these more to put units inside rather than just to upgrade to the machine gun or with the mortar. So to achieve this, notice I've got 1000 manpower, 100 munitions to start. Put this down to 900, but now there's a new button over here, Salvage Fighting Position. Salvaging this gives you 75% of the resources back. So I'm going to try this out. I think I'm going to turn off speed ups here, so you can see this in its natural speed. So I don't need my engineers nearby, I can just click that button. It looks like maybe it takes 10 seconds. Plus 75 manpower, so now I've got 975. So yeah, it gives you a way of building these to get cover, but then, you know, if your opponent kills it, that's minus 100 manpower for you, but if it's no longer in a useful spot anymore, you can get your resources back. In the patch notes, it only specifies the unupgraded fighting position, so what we're going to do here is upgrade the machine gun.
Initiating research.
And you can see the salvage button is still here. That cost me 60 munitions, so I'm down to 40. So I'm just going to turn off speed ups in case that causes any bugs with this. Salvage this. Will we get any munitions back after salvaging the upgraded? Notes did not say you could salvage upgraded bunkers or fighting positions. So yeah, you can get the manpower back from it, but you don't get the munitions back. But on the mortar pit, actually there is no salvage button here. It's tied up with, you know, veterancy stuff instead. Even if we unlock veterancy, no salvage on the mortar pit, just on the machine gun fighting position can you salvage it, and the unupgraded one, of course. Demolition charges have received quite a few changes in this patch. They've buffed up the AoE. Their near damage radius has been increased, so, you know, close to the center of the blast zone. That's the near damage. It's been spread out, so they'll do max damage over a larger area. And then also the amount of damage they've done towards the outer edges of the AoE has also been improved, so they should be quite a lot more lethal. So we're going to test that out with the SSF commandos. Hidden demo charge. So first thing you'll notice is the circle. The red dotted line circle is now quite a lot bigger. Always had 8 AoE, the demo charge, as far as I'm aware, but the amount of damage it did towards the edges was so little that it didn't really matter too much. But now maybe it does, so. You can also see it's got a different icon for that. So we're going to switch over to enemy. And that's a Ranger Squad dead. Got a little bit of a burst from the SSFs, but Ranger Squad dead. And of course, that experience does go to the squad that planted it. So that's pretty strong. Over here, we've got a slightly different scenario. Got 2 squads. Just so we can see the edges. So we can see, you know, they're just about towards the edges, the Ranger models that are on this side. Ranger models, remember, have 115 health each, one of the most durable squads in the game. Killed them all. Killed them all, dude. On the very, very outer edge of the circle? Oh my goodness. What have they done? Alright, so now we're going to try this. We're going to put a ranger in this building. They're going to be shooting at this squad out of these windows, so they're on the far side of the building. Move forward. Keep alert. We're going to demolish this. See how that goes. So you can see they're in these windows over here on the other side of the building. For example, this is the demo charges AoE. Okay, so yeah, buildings, large buildings. You probably want to try put it towards the middle of the building. It's not going to kill everything inside a building guaranteed because it doesn't have damage all on hold like grenades do, for example. One thing I did notice in the mod tools as well is that they increased the damage demo charges do to enemies, but they didn't change the amount of damage they do to friendly units. So I'll try that out here as well. I might spawn a couple more rangers while I'm doing that. See how it does against a ranger that's really spread out. Just in their natural formation. Okay, so chuck one right in the middle of them here. And then we'll see how it does against a friendly unit. Friendly.
That was a squad of rangers.
Oh, they're dead.
They're all gone. Looks like we got a mission. Commander, CPs are waiting to be used.
Is the what's going on here, man? Are demo charges now just completely busto? Maybe, like, especially for the SSF ones that are still hidden. That is insane, the amount of wipe you can get from this demo charge. No, it's also a little bit strange that they don't leave behind light cover craters after they explode, right? And that feels a little bit unusual for that kind of explosion. Now I'm trying out the demo charge from the commandos. Friendly fire. This is right on the edge. The rangers, will they be able to survive this? Okay, they can. So, okay, that's all right. I tested them on enemies as well, and they all died, so It's not just the SSF Commandos demo that's crazy. It's all of them. The Goliath from the Funkwagen also supposed to have the same stats, I think, as the demo charge. So we'll see how that does. A bit further away, there it goes. So yeah, they've got new explosion effects on this as well. Maybe I can do a bit before and after. But very, very lethal now. Demo charges and Goliaths extremely strong. A huge change to the way that you capture territory. You can no longer construct things like sandbags, mines, tank traps and whatever while you are capturing a point. So I'll run to the point here, start capturing it. Oh, I want to wire this off. Start construction. Not only does it, you know, see, whenever I'm constructing, it's like a tug of war. It's going seesawing back and forth. So as they run from wire to wire segment, it does a little bit of capping. But whenever they're constructing, you lose cap progress. It doesn't just stop it, you actually lose capture progress. Developers say they wanted, you know, to make it easier for you to build stuff like sandbag wires out in the open, more of a feature of the game, rather than just kind of isolating it, nerfing it everywhere else just because it's too strong maybe while capturing points, which I think is a noble goal. Going to be a big change. I told myself I'll give myself 2 weeks, try and figure out if I like this change or not, so that's the time frame I've decided on. I think it does, of course, favour certain factions more than the others, like USF. A lot of their starts don't really involve units that can build wire and so on, and they've got squads that can kind of run around, don't need cover as much, so it's not going to affect them too much. They're going to be the benefactors, whereas maybe Wehrmacht, we have a lot of wire planters and sandbag needers, might suffer in the early game. We'll see how it all shakes out though. Now notice this doesn't affect you if you're doing other tasks while capping, such as trying to repair a vehicle. You can still repair and capture. Similar story if you got something like a Krudschützen with auto repair, that can repair itself while capping as well. So it's just affecting your ability to construct, not do other things while capping. Following that change, they've decreased the amount of time it takes to build a sandbag, gone from 10 down to 6 seconds. Here we are in the mod tools looking at the gammon bomb that foot guards have. You can see there is now a target table bonus for grenades against sandbags. They do 2.5 times damage against sandbags. Now let's see what this looks like in game. Foot guards against a 3 stack of sandbags here. Is that a 3 stack? I think it is, right? No, not anymore. It's completely destroyed. Wow. Let's try this out with a rifleman grenade. I think this might only be a 2 stack. No, this is a 3 stack as well. Okay, rifleman grenade's not quite as powerful. Still 3/4 sandbags destroyed by 1 grenade. One of the weakest grenades in the game. That's double time, soldiers. Okay, so they're buffed up how fast you build sandbags, but then they can get destroyed pretty easily too. Tank traps have also had their build time reduced from 12 down to 9 seconds, and they say they've also increased the spacing of the tank traps. So overall, you know, with the faster build times and wider spacing, should be able to block a passageway faster with tank traps. So I did a pre-patch test. Tank traps for Brits in this formation used to come maybe just to the 15. Now it looks like 16, 17. So a set of 5 tank traps like this is covering maybe 1 or 2 range more. Did it for all 2. I can do a bit of before and afters. It's 5 for USF as well. Turn on speed ups now. See the build time change, and the ones for Axis smaller. They've probably gone about 1 range further as well. Not as much as I was expecting. I believe they also reduced the amount of cover positions tank traps offer, so we're just going to go along here. And it looks like with a 5-man squad, you know, coming in from one side, if you're lucky, you can get like 4 positions. Quite often, the units want to like jump between the tank traps, so maybe they're slightly worse as cover than they used to be. Oh man, those Axis ones are dreadful. Really shockingly bad for use as cover. Now we're looking at barbed wire fences, the ones you can construct with your engineers and so on. Change the way that vehicles interact with them. They say first off, ultralights cannot crush barbed wire anymore. So you can see there I've got a Kragschützen, has to go around barbed wire. So if you try plant it early on like cover or something to deny a spot, your opponent's Kragschützen or whatever cannot come in and crush it. But one step larger, the 250 can, and look at this. See what's happening here? If you crush it with slightly heavier light vehicles, it gives them a speed debuff, and that debuff stacks. So we'll go down the whole line. We'll see how he goes. Slow, slower, slower, slower. Stack, stack, stack. Crawling, absolutely crawling. For 5 seconds, 25% speed debuff after running over barbed wire with your light vehicle. Not sure exactly what the breakpoint is. Looks like the Greyhound still gets slowed by it. What about the Chaffee? Chaffee does not. So Chaffee and larger things that can crush, I think Sandbags, not going to be affected by this. On the other side here, we've got the reinforced barbed wire. I'm not sure what can construct it apart from if you go blockade equipment and the new Panzer command Battlegroup for DAK. I don't know if any other thing has access to it. You can see it's slightly different. It's got some like tank trap looking stuff in the middle of it. Might be hard to tell at like just a glance the difference. But this one also has vehicle blocking properties. I think, yeah, like light vehicles like the Greyhound cannot crush it at all. Like with regular wire. So up to the Greyhound cannot crush it. But the Chaffee can, and the Chaffee will get slowed by it. I think the Sherman, similar story, also with reinforced wire, going to get slowed by it, but I think units that have heavy crush, things like the Pershing, Bulldozer, they will not be affected. Oh no, even the Pershing. Okay, so that blockade equipment, reinforced wire, even able to slow down the big boy tanks. Ambient buildings, aka garrisons, have had their health reduced on medium and large sized buildings. So this is small, it's got 800 health. This is, I would say this is like a medium, it's got 1200 health. I don't know what the healths were before this. This is a large 1800, and this one's like really, really big. 2700. So that's the way it's split at the moment. To offset that a little bit, mortars have had a target kill penalty added against buildings. Now they're only doing 60% damage. But that doesn't apply to things like the pack out, so that's still doing full damage to buildings. They also said they changed the amount of health that like tiles on the roof has, so you get an idea for how damaged a building is just by like looking at it from the default camera angle without having to like hover over it trying to see the health bar of it. Just visually you'll get a better idea of how damaged it is. So let's have a go. So maybe they tried to increase the destruction a bit more, like tried to make it look like it's getting shot up a bit more with less damage. It feels like it. I tried it on this building before. I had to redo the test because this building was bugged. It didn't take any damage and just disappeared. So it might be something for the devs to look into. I don't know if this one's on any maps. So that's what that looks like. I haven't seen any tile damage on the roof yet. It's at half health. We'll try a mortar barrage, see if damage coming down from the top changes things a bit. Okay, tiles are starting to get damaged now. Wonder if it applies like to where the source of damage is right from the start rather than its overall health total. And if I keep shooting, is it going to keep damaging the tiles? Probably not. Flat. Alright, well yeah, that's a pretty cool change overall. Is that different too? I thought when you flattened a building like this, it would become ruined and you couldn't pass through it. And you required like a heavy shell to get this kind of flattening, rather than just a normal Sherman attack. Is that different? That feels like they've changed something there. Demo charges and Goliaths have had their bonus damage against buildings increased by another 50%. So we'll see how this goes here against the 1800 health building. 1100 damage total. So against a pretty large building, gets it pretty low. A building like that, see you later. And that's what I was expecting from this building to kind of collapse into. This one's impassable now. They kind of flipped them around on how they work. That's very strange. If you didn't know, Paradrop planes are invulnerable because Relic didn't want the plane getting shot down before the unit got dropped off. Because a lot of these units, you don't have an alternative. You can't deploy them on the ground. You have to paradrop them in, and AA could potentially just shut off like a third of your battle group otherwise. So they made them invulnerable, which I think is fine if they wanted to do that. But the problem was AA units would still shoot at those invulnerable planes. They couldn't gain any veterancy. They couldn't kill them, obviously. So it was just a waste of time. On top of that, it was just a massive negative because your opponent would then know the position of your AA unit. If it was like a DAK unit that was auto-repairing, it would stop repairing because now it's in combat. So it was just completely unfair that AA units would actually shoot at paradrop units. Gave a big advantage to your enemy. But now we're going to do a couple of paradrops here. And this AA unit doesn't care. But sending in something else. There's a smoke drop run. And we'll shoot at those. So it kind of gives you a bit of warning as the opponent as well. Like, okay, my AA unit's not shooting at the plane. I know that's a paradrop. So yeah, I think that's fair enough. If this is the system they want to go for, I think this was a good change to make. Button abilities, such as the Vet 1 ability on the quad, have had the debuff they provide increased from 5 seconds up to 7.5 seconds, whether that be on deflection or penetration. Deflection halves the penalties they apply. So try that here against P4, put the button on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. Probably miscounted that. Try it out on the flak. So this one's slightly different. You have to target the vehicle. Yep. And what about the one that's on the Vet 3 Holston? Yep, even that one works. So yeah, all button abilities last 2.5 seconds longer. I will say that generally these have been underutilized. Like this doesn't get used terribly often. This pretty much everyone goes for speed buff. So I think buttons were due a bit of a buff. Loads of different tanks have had their machine guns buffed this patch by a significant amount as well. I think it's maybe a bit too much for me to go through all of these individually and demonstrate them in game, but have a look at them here. First off, the Pintle on the P4 and Tiger, it's had its moving burst increased to 1, so it's going to be doing just as long bursts on the move as it would be doing stationary. They did nerf the accuracy of it on the move slightly, but giving it full duration burst is well and truly going to massively offset that. We've got that on the side monitor here, so here it is moving after 7 and 4, and before it was 5-ish and 1.8. So if we go quick back and forth, you can see that is a huge jump in the Pintle's DPS on Wehrmacht, and the DAK stuff got it as well. They got actually a slightly higher fire accuracy buff for the DAK stuff. So there you go. Another big winner here, the Easy 8s. Look at this, almost got twice as much accuracy at close and over twice as much at afar. USF got some very strong MGs on their tanks. Churchill, long range, twice as much now. Matilda didn't get any at long range, more of a close range beast now. Not too far off, like double accuracy at close. The P4 kind of got a little bit of a tweak just at long range, maybe about twice as much at long range. So I'm going to test out machine guns only against a squad of riflemen mid to long range. As a side note, I think they also mentioned in the patch notes they fixed the suspension on the EZ8. I don't know what the before and after of that would look like, but there you go. Those people who care about that. Okay, so good initial burst from the P4 there. Seems like the EZ8's got like longer bursts. But they actually look pretty similar in lethality in this test. They're very, very close between the EZ8. Right, I thought I'd maybe out of range for that. But yeah, they seem to be like neck and neck, the machine guns of these two tanks. Relic have made a load of changes to how tank riding works. First off, you can load from further away, and it should take a shorter amount of time to load on. Also, unloading should be faster as well. Does definitely look faster on the unload. It's noticeable. On top of this, they've changed it. You can see I'm not on hold fire by default when loading. So you can manually do this if you want to tank ride. But by default, you will not be on hold fire. And if I come in range, find a tank, it will like auto attack, shoot, and then like once it's shot, the dudes will auto unload. And there's actually more angle the tank can take. So if I'm coming along here, used to only have 8 degrees the turret could rotate. Now it's got, basically, was it 60? So you can see that's the maximum angle the turret can rotate during tank fighting. A huge change to vehicle combat in this patch: when you get a rear armor hit on a medium or heavy tank, will now do 33% more damage. So the Sherman usually does 120 damage per shot. Blasting on the Tiger there does 161. So they've put it slightly above that threshold, just so, you know, hits that break point, which will change shots to kill on a lot of tanks. 33% more damage. So they said they're trying to encourage more people trying to get onto the flanks. They've at the same time they've like nerfed the near penetration on quite a few units, because before this change, typically players would just kind of get around onto the side armor, not bother trying to go around onto the rear, and then just go for side armor hits because you're near penetration. If you're point blank on the side, you generally do enough penetration to reliably damage. So there wasn't that much incentive to get onto the rear, which I can kind of agree with. This will change vehicle combat a lot because, you know, like handheld anti-tank snares and stuff coming onto the rear armor. So if you're doing a dive past the enemy's lines, they line up Panzerfaust or something on you. Now that Panzerfaust is going to be landing on the rear armor, it's going to be doing a tremendous amount of damage to your tanks trying to go for dives. So that's another problem. Might decrease aggressiveness maybe with medium and heavy tanks. On top of that, there is also a problem sometimes where you can do like rear armor hits from the front. The way this was explained to me just a few days ago was that when a tank misses and it does a scatter shot, which is basically the same as attack ground, the game has like update ticks every 1/8 of a second, I think it is. And depending on where the projectile is when that tick happens, it might be here or it might be back here. And if it's back here when that tick happens, you can get a rear arm hit from the front on scatter shots. So before this, it didn't really matter too much because it would just get the rear armor value, probably guaranteed penetration because of that, whatever. But now getting rear arm hits from the front, that could be a 33% more damage, and that's a big deal. I could definitely imagine rear arm hits from the front being rather rage-inducing after this change. Another change to medium and heavy tanks: their moving scatter has been nerfed. So when you're on the move, I think a lot of people know that you have a moving accuracy penalty, making you less likely to hit enemy vehicles, but there's also a moving scatter penalty. So if you miss a shot through the accuracy system, we'll then go through the scatter system, and that is also multiplied, so it'll scatter more when you're firing on the move, and that has been increased this patch. Used to be 25% more scatter, now it's 50% more scatter when firing on the move. So obviously this will affect tank-on-tank fights. You'll be more likely to miss those scatter shots when shooting at the enemy's tank. But I think more importantly, this will affect fighting against infantry. When firing on the move, your tank's main gun hits will be less likely to land on infantry. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why they buffed up the machine guns on most of these tanks, because you'll be losing some from the main gun, but you'll be gaining it back on the machine guns. There are some exceptions to this rule. All of these vehicles don't have that moving scatter penalty added on. So the Easy-8 mobility is a big part of its identity. Similar story for the Crusaders. Centaur's like a big blobby tank. I don't know what's going on there. But then also the autocannon weapons didn't get any scatter nerfs. So these two AA vehicles, all of these vehicles didn't get the moving scatter penalty. And yeah, this just applies to medium and heavies, similar to the rear armor change. Light vehicles unaffected by this. Moving on to the US Forces changes, and we're starting out in the Air Support Centre because there's a new upgrade here called Improved Aircraft Armour, which gives them 50% more health to all aircraft. And this replaces the upgrade, I believe, that made these abilities cost less munitions. And that's the important thing to note. It says all aircraft, not just the ones from here. I actually tested this on the Spec Ops Loiter, and it took a flak feeling about 22 seconds to shoot down both planes naturally, and with this upgrade it took it about 32 seconds, so an extra 10 seconds. So this ad opens up a lot of new synergies for the Air Support Centre. If you're looking to use aircraft from battle groups as well, this could be a very worthwhile option. The Weapons Support Centre has gone up in fuel cost from 10 to 15. Now it's got the same fuel cost as the barracks. A lot of units in this WC has been buffed recently, and it's pretty good now, so they felt like they need to increase the cost. It'll also delay, if you're trying to like rush out an M3, the extra 5 fuel will be feeling it. Or if you want a side tech, maybe you've gone for a lot of Rangers, you want to get side tech to bazookas, super bazookas, you're going to have to pay 5 more fuel to accomplish that. Related to this, we've got the Mechanized Support Centre. If you get this, you used to be able to build the half-tracks in the Weapons Support Centre, but no longer. Those insta-build half-tracks are now in the motor pool instead, with the Greyhound, Chaffee and whatnot, and the cost of straight building them has been massively decreased. You can see basically they are the same cost as building an M3. The M3 has also had a build time increase from 30 to 45 seconds. So if you're trying to rush out an M3, it's going to be coming in quite a lot slower, between 5 fuel delay and 15 slower. Also in the Mechanized Support Centre, the repair station you get now has 8 health per second instead of 6. So try and tempt you away from the Infantry Support Centre a little bit more by making the repairs juicier. Going back to the M3, there's a new veterancy option here, Fortified Position. Now you can build a fighting position for free once every minute and a half. But if you salvage this, it gives you 0 resources back, unlike the ones you construct with your engineers. So you can't get infinite or manpower from that. Also on the medic half-track, there's a new option here. Increases the healing rate on the Med M3 by 0.8 per second. So very fast healing out of that with that vet option. And finally, the 75mm M3 also got a vet change. Its target weak point. Now it no longer shares a cooldown with the barrage. That's nice. But if you use target weak point, instead of it continuously firing, maybe being able to get 3 shots off with it while it's active, it only works for 1 hit. So quite a lot weaker, but doesn't share a cooldown, easy to access. I do think it was too strong before. Would disable like heavy tanks because it's guaranteed to pin. For a very long time made this ability extremely strong. Part of the reason why these were extremely popular previously. Still think it's pretty decent, especially now that you're going to have better access to it without it sharing the cooldown. The Greyhound's Armoured Skirts upgrade now costs 20 munitions less to get. The Chaffee now costs 30 manpower less to build. Top of that, it's got some buffs. It's got a faster rotation and pivot rate, so it's going to be able to zip around a bit better. It's got a new ability here called Smoke Shell. You can see it goes out to 40 range, same range as its regular gun. And this is just a smoke shell. and you can use it while driving as well. So it makes this very easy to use as long as it stays in range, as long as you're not trying to do it back here and then driving out of range. The smoke shell will be popped off, so very handy for the Chaffee having access to a smoke like this. There is one peculiar thing about it though, probably a bug. You can see that the turret on the Chaffee after firing the smoke shell never returns to facing forwards, just keeps pointing in the direction the smoke shell was launched. Whereas usually if you haven't seen the target that direction for like 5 seconds, it starts going back to the middle. But the smoke shell, it just seems to lock it one direction, so hopefully Relic can address that. They've overhauled the Chaffee's veterancy a little bit as well. Used to get weapon traverse at Vet 2, now that's been moved to Vet 1, and the acceleration bonus it had at Vet 1 has been removed. Chaffee didn't really need the acceleration bonus much, so that's fine. And new at Vet 2, it's got 20% accuracy. Finally, the Chaffee has had its near penetration reduced by 10, as I mentioned earlier. They really want you to try and get onto the rear of the enemy's vehicle rather than on the side. So by dropping its near penetration, they're encouraging you to do that. So yeah, a lot of changes to the Chaffee. Between this and the fuel cost increases to Tier 4, I could definitely imagine we will see a return of these two vehicles getting spammed and then going into a call-in. So expect to see more of these in this patch. For the Sherman, they nerfed its near penetration by 40. So it used to be 180, that's the old single player values over here. And now it's down to just 140 because they want you to try and flank rather than just driving in at point blank and that being good enough. But they didn't change the 76mm Sherman, that still got very high penetration. Same story for the Easy 8. So it does make those upgunned variants of the Sherman look quite a lot more appealing. The Hellcat has also had its near penetration reduced by 40. Again, they're trying to encourage you to maybe get onto the side armor at least with it, instead of just driving into point blank on the front being strong enough. They've also tweaked the veterancy. I think I covered it during my veterancy overhaul guide that I did a couple months ago. But the HVAP rounds, the Vet 1, they made it a Vet 1 ability. They actually had worse moving accuracy than the regular rounds. So it wasn't all benefit just popping the HVAP. But now they've changed that as the same moving accuracy as the regular rounds, 0.75. So HVAP a little bit more appealing to use. They've also changed the other Vet 1 shoot and scoot. Notice that they didn't actually update the description here pre-unlock, but they have fixed it here. 10% more speed from shoot and scoot and 25% more XL decel. So we're going to have a bit of a race here. Make this an enemy. This is going to shoot. And then we're going to scoot. Have a bit of a race up against a Vet 0 Hellcat. Remember, Vet 1 does give you 25% XL decel. Let's see how it goes. Oh, he's scooting all right. I must say about 12-ish range head start gap from this ability. So I think most players were probably using the HVAP, but shoot and scoot now a little bit better. The Armoured Battlegroup has received quite a lot of changes. First thing you'll notice is the new icons. This one, and this one, all significantly different. And even the tanks in this, slightly different green, a deeper hue, maybe closer to what they look like actually in-game. So it's nice to see they're still tweaking stuff like that. Then in terms of command point costs, the field repairs has come down by 1, though you guys know I love the recovery vehicle, so I'm always going to pick that anyway. On the other side, the Scott has actually gone up in cost by 1. I will say that this did get quite a lot more play last patch. After they fixed, I can't remember if it was the autofire or the barrage, they fixed the AoE on it, made it a lot more potent at its previous timing. But I imagine after this change, competing with Seek and Destroy, we'll see very, very little Scott. The side effect of that also is that the Easy 8 call-in is going to be arriving at least 1 command point later. If you come down here, and then the Easy 8 production also got increased by 1, so it could be coming in 2 command points later. You want to build them out of your base. So in total, if you want to go straight for the call-in, that is 12 command points, which is actually the same as getting the Pershing and the new heavy weapons. So maybe this makes Armored look quite a lot less appealing. You get the nice, shiny, very strong Pershing instead for the same amount of command points. It doesn't come with an engineer you might not want. Rangers had their Vet 2 rate of fire buff increased by 5%. Okay, it's not a huge deal. Fine. SSFs had their base health increased by 5. I will say SSFs already felt strong enough to me. I don't think they really need this confusing change. Also remember, their demo charge now is absolutely bonkers. So watch out for SSFs. These things are going to be wipers. In the Special Operations Battle Group, the marked vehicle plane has had a health increase by 500, so it's going to be harder to shoot that down. The smoke screen now costs no munitions, but has a longer cooldown. So most people are going for raiding flares because they're incredibly powerful, but now you can get a free smoke screen instead once every 3 minutes. They increase the cooldown by a minute. Makes that a bit more of an appealing option if you want some easy smoke. The Packouts' Vet 1 white phosphorus barrage should be popping off its shells faster and scattering over a wider area. So we'll see how that goes here. Just so it can carpet a larger area with that phosphorus. Still got the problem where some shells go super high, take ages to land, some skate on the ground and land really fast. I wonder when they're going to change that. It's a lot of artillery units, but there we go. Covers a bigger area. So if your opponent starts to dodge it, you might be able to hit them with like 3-ish shells, depending on which way they go and which way the scatter happens. Makes the Packouts' Vet 1 a bit better. The Whizbang received quite a few buffs this patch. First off, if you give the order to barrage, now the rocket launch will raise itself up faster, so there will be less of a delay between you giving the order to barrage and the first rocket being launched. On top of that, they've reduced the reload time between rockets and reduced the aim time as well, so it should deploy all of its rockets from a barrage faster in total, making the regular barrage more potent. So I'm going to try it here against this. This is usually the range I'd suggest using the Whizbang at, like 50 to 60-ish. If you tried to use it at max range, I generally felt like it wasn't very good. So let's see how it goes here. So yeah, that raises up so much faster now. Yeah, I mean, that looks quite a bit better. Just, as I said, just the delay reduce is so big. It'll make it much harder for your enemy to dodge us as well, I'd say, maybe. Then on top of that, you can see that the long-range barrage no longer shares a cooldown with the regular barrage, similar to what the Wespe and the Walking Stuka got previously. They've upped the munitions cost on this, though, to 50 from 35, so we'll see that. So that one also looks like it's more responsive. But it looks like they hadn't fixed that problem. Always with the long-range barrage, the first rocket seems to fly wildly off course. Is there a different sound effect there as well? Has that really only got a 75-second cooldown? That's pretty fast. Now that they don't share cooldowns. They didn't nerf this? They just gave it a high immunity cost, huh? Okay.
That's an affirmative.
Well, yeah, that makes the Whizbang a lot more appealing. I think most people just didn't bother getting Vet at all. And just, if they needed to jettison, they'd lock into jettison, deploy it, and then use jettison. But now, much more of a reason to go for the long-range barrage. Moving on to the Wehrmacht changes, here we are in the Panzergrenadier company. You'll notice there's a new upgrade down here, side skirts. Now available here, or in the Luftwaffe company, once you get the support elements. So I think this is a nice change because obviously tier 4 has gone up in cost by 15 fuel. So if you had a couple of these units like the Stug and the Wirbel, and you just want to put skirts on them, they'll be arriving quite a lot later, more expensive just to get skirts on your existing tier 3 units. So that's nice. On top of this, you can see now these skirts also apply to the command tank that you can get through the breakthrough battle group. Looks like, you know, there's quite a lot of space around the rear since this turret isn't quite as bulbous on the backside, on the stubby. But yeah, I will imagine we'll see a lot more Wirbels and Stugs this patch after tier 4 cost increase, and probably stalling to things like the King Tiger, Tiger, Panther, Corlins. I think we'll see a lot more of that action over Tier 4 techs. The MG42 has had the amount of suppression it deals increased by 15%. So we're going to do a comparison here, MG versus Vickers, see how long they take to suppress. And then pin. Bit of RNG involved there, but faster. I wonder if after this change they could perhaps revert that change they made previously, where the MG42 had better AoE suppression. The AoE suppression on the MG42 now is so wide, it kind of feels counterintuitive how far apart you have to spread your squads not to get suppressed by it. It feels a little bit strange. Panzergrenadiers have had their Vet 2 rate of fire bonus increased by 10%. On top of that, their Vet 1 ability automatic fire pretty much got nerfed out of existence in the previous patch. It was so bad, it's basically a liability to use it in any scenario. It was extremely rare you could find an opportunity to make use of automatic fire, but they've partially reverted that nerf, mainly on like the starting speed debuff it gives you. Now starts at 35% instead of, I think it was 60%. So that makes a really big difference. These two, I think, will bring back the Panzergrenadier in terms of popularity. So what we're going to do here is going to make these riflemen enemy. Put the Panzergrenadiers on automatic fire mode. Riflemen go, uh-oh, need to get out of here. Retreat. Begins chase. And it's, a respectable amount of damage. The Wirbelwind had its fire accuracy increased by about 12%, so I figured we'd do a test here at far range up against the Crusader AA, which had a massive overhaul this patch. I'll cover that more in detail when we get to the British section, but now that's not a call-in, it's had a huge number of changes. So who's going to be able to kill the rifleman at long range faster between these two? Let's find out. Now, I will say that the Whirlwind did pick up popularity quite a lot last patch, because players would go for like quite often two of them while stalling for the Tiger. It was pretty common to see in 1v1s at least. Oh, we've got a new sound effect on this as well. So it looks like the Crusaders may be a tiny bit better, but only like a marginal amount, at least in this like test long range, the squad's spread out. The Stug G has had its penetration increased in the mid and far range by 20 both instances, and if we look at the armour of a Sherman, it means the Stug is just about guaranteed to pin it at all ranges. So that's pretty good for the Stug, combined up with the easier access to skirts. This could be a bit of a Stug patch. The Panzer IV's Vet 1 ability has been overhauled. Now upon activation, you get a 40% rate of fire buff for 15 seconds. After that wears off, then you get a 50% speed and rotation rate penalty for the next 15 seconds. So we'll have a look at that here. Popping it, fighting against the Sherman. So my first impressions fighting against this yesterday was that this buff was extremely strong. Like, the extra rate of fire kind of meant that you would bully the other tank, and by the time it wore off, the other tank was so wounded they couldn't fight back against you anyway. So the speed penalty just didn't really matter that much. So yeah, first impressions, this new P4 ability, very, very good. The Brummbar has been nerfed against vehicles. It's had a target table penalty added to it, so it will do 25% less damage against vehicles. Still the same amount to other things like buildings and infantry, but 25% less to vehicles. On top of that, it's had its penetration reduced by 40, I think it is, at all ranges. So it will be quite a lot less effective. Used to kind of bully stuff like the Matilda, because, it had decent penetration, has the deflection damage. So let's see how that goes now. So it does 30 damage on deflection. So yeah, the target tail penalty is also applied to the deflection damage, otherwise it would do 40 on deflection. For the Wehrmacht Tiger, its Vet 1 ability is now S-mine launchers, same as the one that's on the DAK Tiger, instead of that time fuse shot, which kind of sucked, if I'm going to say. If you're unsure, you maybe don't play Wehrmacht, this is what it does. Big suppression, big damage to mainly infantry that are right around it. Very strong ability. Well, also they've added this advanced gunnery. I don't think this used to exist. They've added like a tooltip saying that the Tiger's got 5 more range than most other tanks. Looking at the Italian coastal battle group, the artillery officer is now 30 manpower cheaper. He did receive quite a lot of nerfs over the last couple patches, so alright. I still don't think this is really going to push him into viability that much, if I'm honest. On top of this, Designate defensive line now provides the 25% damage reduction to bunkers as well. It says it in the description to bunkers, but in that white text down the bottom, it doesn't say infantry and bunkers, so they need to update that. This is okay, I guess. I think most people would like alternative styles of Italian coastal to be viable, not just, oh, let's make bunkers harder to kill again, you know? I think the coastal reserves themselves are like a little bit too weak, and that's maybe one of the main problems with this. Like most people only getting one squad of coastals just because you can get them straight away at the start of the game, skip, you know, get a fast start that way. Their viability, you know, with their bad moving performance and everything else, just kind of hurting them. And remember, Tommy's also got buffed this patch as well, so they're going to fall even further behind. The coastal reserves did get a buff to how fast they build stuff now, so that's a little bit of something for them. But yeah, as I said, I don't think this is going to make them relevant. And yeah, we keep hearing this Obice talking to me for some reason. Why do they keep saying stuff? I'm not sure. Maybe there's an audio bug. Maybe this is on cheap mods. I hope so. I hope this doesn't happen in game where the Obice just keeps talking to me. Anyway, it's Vet 3 damage reduction has been increased from 15 to 30%, kind of in line with the other emplacements, which I think is a good thing because, well, they mentioned in the patch notes, it's got a really large hitbox, so it's quite easy to counter barrage. And they kind of like pre-nerfed its vet because they thought maybe it would be too strong once everything else in the battle group kind of combined on top of it. But I feel like that's kind of like lazy balancing. Like, oh, let's pre-nerf this so you have to get every single other upgrade just to bring it up to parity with the other emplacements, other howitzers and stuff. I don't really like that style. You know, stuff from your battle group should be giving you the juice, not, oh, you have to unlock everything just to bring it up to parity with somebody else on the other side. The MG15 on Falchion Pyros has come down in cost by 10 munitions from 90 to 80, which I think makes sense. I don't think it got any buffs throughout all of the TTK changes, so it had kind of fallen off in terms of relevancy since the game's launched. And if we compare it to, say, the Breda on Bersaglieri, you can see the MG a little bit worse than the Breda up close, quite a lot better at long range, but obviously you can't use this while firing on the move, whereas this has actually very good moving performance, doesn't lose that much DPS, so much less flexibility on how you use this. And I think the Breda costs 70 munitions, so I think it makes sense that the MG15 comes down in cost to try and match that kind of performance. One of the biggest winners from this patch is the grenade launcher. This is on Falchion Pyros and the DAK Panzer Pyros. They get the same one. It has aim time reduced by 1/4 of a second, so when you run into a squad, take 1/4 of a second less to launch that first grenade. And that's pretty handy, especially on a unit like the grenade launcher, where you might be like kiting in and out, waiting for the reloads between grenades. That aim time reduction is going to be pretty good on it. They've also doubled its far AoE value. So on the outer edges, it's going to be doing twice as much damage as it used to, which matters a lot, not just because of its out in the open performance, but because of this here, damage all in halt. What this means is that when you're shooting at a unit in a garrison, if it's like a massive building, the grenade launcher lands on one side, all the other models are on the far side of the building. It will do the far AoE value to everything in the building at least, if not more, depending on where the grenade launcher lands. You know, if it lands right on the model, it'll do good damage, but if they're on the far side of the building, it will at least do the far damage. So this doubles its performance essentially against garrisons. But then they've also changed the target tables. They've given it a target table bonus against units that are in heavy cover, units that are in light cover. So now it does 33% more damage against both of those. And units in garrison cover. It used to be 50%. You can see the old value here. Now it's 100% bonus damage. So if we calculate that, 0.2 times 45, that's how much damage it does per shot, is 9. Then double that, it's at least 18 damage per shot from the grenade launcher against units in garrison. So I think this will still be a little bit worse than a flamethrower against a garrison, but it will be a lot better than it used to be. And I've got some footage of that from my old video about grenades from a very long time ago. I think engineers might have had a health buff since this as well. So it's not maybe an entirely apples to apples comparison here, but even with that, the grenade launcher with these changes now knocks out the squad quite a lot faster than it used to. So it already used to be a pretty popular tactic in 4v4s to spam a bunch of Fulcrum Pyros, upgrade them all with the grenade launcher, and then just run around trying to one-shot stuff with that massive blob. And I imagine that's going to be even more popular after these changes. Also in the Luftwaffe Battlegroup, the Stuka Loiter, this has got a new icon, just making that clear. The anti-tank portion of this has been nerfed, so this also affects the DAK anti-tank Loiter. They share the same stats. This one's got one anti-infantry plane, one anti-tank plane. But yeah, the anti-tank portion of this has been nerfed. The amount of bonus damage it does against vehicles has been reduced. Used to be plus 125% damage, now it's only plus 40%, so that's about 42% reduction in damage against vehicles. And if that anti-tank portion happens to hit infantry, you know, you might have engineers nearby trying to do repairs to the vehicle as it's getting targeted, or just as it flies by, they might be in the crossfire. They might get hit by it and used to like pin them straight away, and that won't be happening anymore. So we'll see how they go against the Sherman. I could imagine that sometimes the strafe would now come in on the rear armor and might do more damage. So maybe that will partially offset the damage reduction. Doesn't look like that's happened so far yet, but I could imagine that being a thing. But yeah, overall in the last couple of patches, you know, they've nerfed the health of these loiters. Now they've nerfed the damage on them. So, you know, people have been crying about these for the last 2 years. And finally some action has happened. They are getting hit. I think it's going to come through for one more pass before it times out. But yeah, that's a welcome sign. They've also changed the Brit rocket loiter. We'll have a look at that in my next video, I'm guessing. But that one's kind of got retuned, so it's more likely to hit stuff. But there we go. A tank in the center the entire duration, doesn't die anymore. Left, you know, about 2/3 his health. So a pretty big nerf in this performance overall. In the Mechanized Battlegroup, if you want to unlock Panther production, that now costs 1 command point instead of 0. Same change the Easy 8 got for US forces. The Wespe, obviously one of the massive overperformers in the previous patch, has now been nerfed. It's had a fuel cost increased by 15. Alright. On top of that, its scatter has been nerfed. Apparently, its old scatter on its regular barrage was actually bugged. It wasn't supposed to be that long. So its scatter has been nerfed quite heavily. We're going to test it out here. Not quite at max range, but against a formation of US team weapons. See how it goes. This is fog of war off, so you know, better scatter when you can see with artillery. It's usually, is it 25%? I'm not sure, something like that. I'm firing into vision rather than into the fog. A lot of overshots there, right? I think I was targeting about there, and most of them landed long. So yeah, quite a lot less potent, I think, with its current scatter. They also heavily nerfed the tracking barrage, the Vet 1. There was a major overperformer in the previous patch. They've nerfed like its scatter, so maybe if you're trying to use it to counter barrage enemy bishops, something like that, the scatter might be such that you won't land 2 shots in a row. We'll test that out. And then also, it now shoots high angle shots, so the shells will take a lot longer to land, so it should actually be worse now at tracking moving units. So it's a tracking barrage that doesn't track too well, eh? That's how it is. See how it goes against some riflemen here.
Come on, let's get this show on the road. Artillery ready to deploy. It will be done as ordered.
About 100 range away. So it's not even going to touch them, is it? With a high angle attack. It's having trouble, look at that. So they might need to adjust this a little bit. Did it used to do that? I feel like it didn't used to do that. Maybe it's out of range now. That was weird. So yeah, much worse at tracking a moving unit now. I'll try it out against the Bishop. See if it can kill that or not. So this is at max range against the Bishop. Will we be able to two-shot it? Might even be slightly longer than max range. I'm going to activate it there. Seems like I had to drive forward slightly. So this is with vision as well. And you can see that scatter nerf coming into effect. We did get the kill in the end, but I could easily imagine a scenario where you didn't. Those first two shells way off the mark, and even if that's the way it goes, you know, two shells, you actually see it and then you can dodge away, gives you more time to dodge. So yeah, heavy nerfs to the Wespe this patch. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon backers, and if you enjoy this content, I hope you consider coming on board.